Christina Davis had always been a fighter, but lately, life seemed determined to break her spirit. Her mother's health was declining rapidly due to cancer, a relentless disease that demanded constant and expensive treatments. The financial strain had pushed them to the brink of eviction, with the landlord issuing a final warning: pay up or be out on the streets. Desperate to keep a roof over their heads and continue her mother's treatments, Christina clung to the hope of securing a job at Wright Enterprises, one of the most prestigious companies in the city. The day of the interview, Christina put on her best, albeit worn, business attire. Her nerves were on edge, but she kept reminding herself that she had to succeed. For her mother's sake, failure was not an option. She had heard stories about Ethan Wright, the company's CEO, who was as infamous for his ruthless business tactics as he was for his playboy lifestyle. Despite his reputation, Christina couldn't afford to be intimidated. She needed this job more than anything. As she entered the towering glass building, Christina felt out of place among the polished professionals who barely spared her a glance. The receptionist directed her to the top floor, where Ethan Wright's office was located. The elevator ride felt like an eternity, each floor bringing her closer to what she hoped would be her big break. When she finally reached the top, Christina was led into a luxurious office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. Ethan Wright was seated behind a massive oak desk, his attention focused on a stack of papers. He looked every bit the powerful billionaire, handsome, impeccably dressed, and exuding an air of authority. "Ms. Davis, is it?" Ethan said, glancing at her resume. He barely looked up as he continued. "I see you applied for the executive assistant position." "Yes, sir. I know I may not have all the experience you're looking for, but I'm a fast learner, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to succeed," Christina said, her voice steady despite her nerves. Ethan finally looked up, his piercing blue eyes scanning her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "You're not qualified for this position," he stated bluntly, dismissing her without a second thought. "We need someone with more experience." Christina felt her heart sink, but she wasn't ready to give up. "Please, Mr. Wright, I may not have the experience, but I have the drive. I'm a quick learner, and I'm willing to put in the work. Just give me a chance." Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly not used to being challenged. He opened his mouth to respond when the door to his office suddenly burst open. An elderly woman rushed in, holding a small, crying baby. She moved quickly, placing the baby on Ethan's desk with a note attached to the blanket. "This is your son. Take care of him. Don't try to find me," the woman said in a quivering voice before hurrying out of the room, leaving Ethan and Christina in stunned silence. Ethan stared at the baby, completely taken aback. "What the hell?" he muttered, picking up the note. The baby, who couldn't have been more than a few months old, looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. Ethan's mind raced. He had no idea who the mother could be. He'd had plenty of flings, but none that had mentioned a child. As he tried to process the situation, the door opened again, this time revealing his father, Richard Wright, a man whose presence commanded respect and fear. Richard took one look at the baby, and his expression hardened. "Ethan, what is going on here?" Richard demanded. Who is the mother of this child? Panic flashed in Ethan's eyes. He knew his father well enough to understand the gravity of the situation. If he admitted he didn't know who the mother was, it would be a scandal that could jeopardize his position in the company and, more importantly, his inheritance. Thinking fast, Ethan blurted out the first name that came to mind. "Christina. Christina is the mother and my fiancée." Christina's eyes widened in shock, but before she could protest, Richard's gaze turned cold. "If I find out you're lying, Ethan, you can forget about any inheritance. Do you understand me?" Ethan nodded, his mind racing. Richard turned to leave, but not before casting a skeptical glance at Christina. "You better hope you're telling the truth," he warned before exiting the office. As soon as the door closed, Christina rounded on Ethan. "What the hell was that? I'm not the mother of this child, and I'm certainly not your fiancé." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his expression torn between desperation and determination. "I know, but I didn't have a choice. My father, he would have ruined me. Look, I'll pay you $5 million if you agree to pretend to be my fiancée and the mother of this child until my father transfers the inheritance to me. It's just for a few months, then you can go back to your life." Christina stared at him, disbelief warring with the gnawing fear of losing everything she had. $5 million would solve all her problems. Her mother could receive the best medical care, and they would never have to worry about money again. But the idea of pretending to be the fiancé of a man like Ethan, right, was daunting. "I don't know," Christina began, but the thought of her mother lying in that hospital bed, in need of constant care, made her pause. Could she really turn down such an offer? Ethan watched her, sensing her hesitation. "I know it's a lot to ask, but I'll take care of everything. Your mother's medical bills, the rent, whatever you need. Just help me get through this. And then you can walk away with $5 million and never look back." Christina bit her lip, weighing her options. It was an insane proposition, but what choice did she have? She had to think of her mother. "Fine," she said finally, her voice steady. "I'll do it, but I want everything in writing." Ethan nodded, relief washing over him. "Done. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers." And just like that, Christina's life took a turn she had never expected. She had walked into that office looking for a job and walked out with a fake fiancé, a baby she didn't know, and a promise of $5 million. It was a deal with the devil, but one she couldn't afford to refuse. As they left the office together, the baby in tow, Christina couldn't help but wonder what she had gotten herself into. But she knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back now. The moment Christina agreed to Ethan's proposition, her life became a whirlwind of luxury, deception, and emotional turmoil. Ethan wasted no time in setting the plan into motion. Within hours, his legal team had drawn up a contract detailing the terms of their arrangement. It was all very clinical, except for the stipulation that she must play the role of a doting fiancé and loving mother convincingly enough to fool not only his father, but the entire world. As the ink dried on the contract, Christina couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a life that wasn't hers. A life where she was constantly under scrutiny, where every move she made would be judged, and where the lines between reality and fiction would blur. But $5 million was enough to erase those doubts, at least for now. The next day, Ethan took Christina to his opulent penthouse, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city. It was a far cry from the tiny apartment she had shared with her mother. Christina felt like an imposter as she walked through the luxurious rooms, trying to familiarize herself with this new life. Ethan handed her a credit card and told her to buy whatever she needed to fit the role. Designer clothes, jewelry, anything that would help her look the part of the billionaire's fiancé. He even hired a stylist and a personal shopper to guide her through the transformation. Christina had never felt so out of her depth, but she had no choice but to go along with it. As she stood in front of a mirror, dressed in a sleek, expensive outfit that felt foreign to her, Christina couldn't help but wonder if she was losing herself in the process. But then she thought of her mother, who was now receiving the best care in a private hospital, and of the future she could secure with the money Ethan had promised. She had to keep reminding herself that this was just temporary, a means to an end. Days turned into weeks as Christina settled into her new life. Ethan was surprisingly attentive, always making sure she was comfortable and that her mother's needs were being met. Despite his reputation as a playboy, he was a devoted father, spending time with the baby whenever he could. Christina found herself admiring the way he cared for his son, a side of him she hadn't expected. But playing the role of Ethan's fiancée was not without its challenges. They attended lavish events where they had to pretend to be a couple deeply in love. At first, Christina struggled to keep up the facade, feeling like she was constantly being judged by the wealthy socialites who surrounded them. But Ethan was always there, guiding her through the charade with an easy smile and a reassuring touch. Their chemistry was undeniable, and soon, even Christina started to believe the lie. However, living with Ethan was another story. His penthouse was massive, yet it felt suffocating at times. They were always together, at events, at home, even in the nursery where they cared for the baby. And as much as she tried to keep her distance, Christina found herself drawn to him. Ethan had a way of breaking down her defenses, of making her forget that this was all just an act. One night, after a particularly exhausting charity gala, Christina found herself alone with Ethan on the penthouse balcony. The city lights glittered below them, and for a moment, everything felt surreal. Ethan handed her a glass of champagne and leaned against the railing, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "You did well tonight," he said, his voice low. "I couldn't have asked for a better partner in this charade." Christina forced a smile, but there was an ache in her chest that she couldn't ignore. "It's all just pretend, right? We're just playing our parts." Ethan's smile faded, and for a moment, he looked as if he wanted to say something more. But then he shook his head, raising his glass to hers. "To making it through this together." They clinked glasses, but the moment felt bittersweet. As Christina sipped her champagne, she realized that pretending to be in love with Ethan was becoming harder each day. Not because she couldn't act, but because her feelings were starting to blur the lines between fiction and reality. The more time Christina spent with Ethan and the baby, the more she found herself slipping into the role of a mother. She had never expected to grow so attached to a child that wasn't hers, but the baby had a way of wrapping her around his tiny finger. She cared for him as if he were her own, rocking him to sleep, feeding him, and singing him lullabies that her mother used to sing to her. Ethan noticed the change in her, and it softened something in him. He began to see Christina in a different light, not just as the woman he had hired to play a part, but as someone who had become an integral part of his life. He admired her resilience, her compassion, and the way she had embraced a role that she had never signed up for. One afternoon, while Christina was playing with the baby in the nursery, Ethan stood in the doorway, watching them. The baby giggled as Christina tickled his tummy, his laughter filling the room. Ethan's heart swelled with an unfamiliar warmth as he watched them, a sense of contentment that he hadn't felt in years. He walked into the room and knelt beside them, reaching out to stroke the baby's soft hair. "You're really good with him," Ethan said softly. Christina looked up at him, her eyes full of tenderness. "He's easy to love. He's just a baby, innocent and pure." Ethan nodded, his gaze lingering on her. "You've made this whole situation bearable, Christina. I don't know what I would have done without you." Christina's heart skipped a beat at the sincerity in his voice. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that this could be real, that maybe, just maybe, there was something more between them than just a business arrangement. But then she remembered the contract, the money, and the lies that had brought them together. She quickly looked away, focusing on the baby instead. "I'm just doing what I agreed to do." Ethan's expression darkened, but he didn't push the issue. Instead, he stood up and offered her his hand. "Come on, let's get some fresh air. You've been cooped up in here all day." Christina hesitated for a moment before taking his hand. As they walked out onto the balcony, the cool evening breeze washing over them, she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. She was supposed to be pretending, but the truth was that she was starting to care for Ethan in ways that she hadn't anticipated. The weeks passed, and the tension between Christina and Ethan grew, but not in the way either of them had expected. It wasn't the tension of two people pretending to be in love, but rather the tension of two people trying to deny the very real feelings that were developing between them. Ethan found himself spending more time at home, eager to return to the penthouse where Christina and the baby waited for him. His work, which had once consumed him, now seemed secondary to the moments he shared with Christina. Whether they were sharing a meal, caring for the baby, or simply sitting together in comfortable silence, Ethan realized that he was happiest when he was with her. Christina, on the other hand, was struggling with the reality of her situation. She had agreed to this arrangement for the money, for her mother's sake, but now she was in danger of losing her heart to a man who had never promised her anything but a paycheck. She knew that their relationship was built on lies, but the more time she spent with Ethan, the harder it became to remember that. One rainy night, as the baby slept soundly in his crib, Ethan and Christina found themselves alone in the living room. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the atmosphere was calm, almost intimate. Ethan was sitting on the couch, a glass of whiskey in his hand, while Christina sat across from him, wrapped in a blanket. Ethan looked at her, his gaze intense. "Christina, there's something I need to tell you." Christina's heart raced, fear and anticipation mingling in her chest. "What is it?" Ethan set his glass down and leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. This started out as a business arrangement, but somewhere along the way, it became more than that for me. I know we agreed to pretend, but I can't pretend anymore. I've fallen in love with you, Christina. Christina's breath caught in her throat. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she didn't know what to say. Her mind raced with thoughts of the contract, the money, and the lies that had brought them together. But her heart was telling her something different, something she had been trying to ignore for weeks. "I love you too, Ethan," she finally whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't expect this to happen, but it did, and I don't know what to do." Ethan reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "We can figure it out together. I don't care about the money or the contract anymore. All I care about is you and the baby. I want us to be a real family, not just for show." Christina's tears spilled over as she leaned into his embrace, feeling the weight of the world lift off her shoulders. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that this could be real, that they could be more than just a business arrangement. With their feelings for each other out in the open, Ethan and Christina's relationship transformed. The tension between them melted away, replaced by a deep sense of connection and love that neither of them had anticipated. They were no longer pretending. They were building a life together, one that was based on trust, respect, and genuine affection. Ethan officially proposed to Christina a few weeks later in a private, intimate moment that felt right for both of them. There were no grand gestures or elaborate plans, just the two of them and the baby who had brought them together in the first place. Christina said yes without hesitation, knowing that this was the life she wanted, a life with Ethan and the child she had come to love as her own. The wedding was a small, elegant affair attended by close friends and family. Even Richard Wright, who had been skeptical of their relationship from the start, couldn't deny the love and happiness that radiated from his son and new daughter-in-law. As they exchanged vows, Ethan and Christina promised to cherish each other, to be honest, and to build a future together. No more lies, no more pretending. After the wedding, Christina moved her mother into the mansion, where she could be close to her family and receive the best care possible. The baby, now officially adopted by Ethan, was the light of their lives, bringing joy and laughter to the home every day. As time passed, Ethan and Christina had more children, filling the mansion with the sound of little feet and happy voices. Years went by, and their love only grew stronger. Ethan had transformed from a carefree playboy into a devoted husband and father, and Christina had found the stability and love she had always craved. Together, they had built a life that was rich not just in material wealth, but in the things that truly mattered: love, family, and happiness. And as they sat together one evening, watching their children play in the garden, Ethan took Christina's hand and squeezed it gently. "Thank you for taking a chance on me," he said softly. Christina smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for giving me a life I never dreamed possible." In that moment, they both knew that they had found something rare and beautiful, a love that had started with a lie but had grown into something real and everlasting. And they were determined to hold on to it for the rest of their lives. Hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel. Your participation is essential so that we can continue to bring you more incredible stories. Share it with your friends to help our channel grow. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.